understand that you've never heard before, that goes against every single thing that you have heard prior to this time. So hope you stay with us, and please just listen to us to the end. We're going to be making sure that whatever points are made are driven home so that you'll be able to have a complete comprehension of everything that is being said. And I can can assure you that by the end of today's broadcast, you would not have, anyway, you might have some questions, but we'll give you places you can go where you'll be able to have all of your fears allayed and all of your worries and questions answered. But you'll be able to get enough during this broadcast to make you realize that things are different from the way we've been doing them in the past, especially in the church circles. So I'm Joshua AMATARE coming to you from Kyiv, Ukraine. And without much further ado, I would like to welcome our guest today all the way from Nigeria, Isaac Shola. Hello, Mr. Isaac. Welcome.
Hello, Mr. Joshua. Nice to be with you.
Same here. How are you doing, and how is Nigeria today?
I'm good. Nigeria, well, Nigeria is good too.
Fantastic. So before we go forward, ladies and gentlemen, please share this link on your timeline. Send it to your friends, send it to their inboxes, send the link on WhatsApp so that they can join us for this explosive section. Because trust me, talking about the mass fraud in church is not something you're going to hear every day. So this is a unique one that you don't want to miss. So Mr. Shola or Mr. Isaac, which one do you prefer?
Isaac.
All right. So Isaac, can you tell us how you came about the greatest mass fraud ever?
Yes, it's like I said in the introduction to the book. The book is essentially a summary of my own personal journey when it comes to the subject of money and giving in Christianity. A lot of the things that I talk about in the book, or the things that I kind of am going against in the book, the teachings, the practices that I'm going against in the book, they are things that I've personally, participated in. I've given all, the tithes, the offerings, first fruit seeds, everything. I've done all that. But at a certain time in my life, I began to see that, it was when what brought it to my attention is when manipulation is taken to the extreme. When you begin to see people actually go out of their way to make things up, to lie, and to just manipulate people. And that's what first brought, the ill of giving that we're very familiar with in Christianity. That's what first brought it to my attention. Right. So I became curious. At first, I tried to distance myself from some of the places where I see that those kind of teachings and practices that are just explicitly wrong on every level. I began to distance myself from it. But with time, I got introduced to Pastor Sunday and started listening to some of his teachings. There was a particular series he did then in 2018, if I remember correctly, which is the God of Mammon series, And listening to the series opened my eyes to a lot of things. And as the series proceeded, and even after the series, I began to, really, really dig into the concepts that some of the things that were talked about during the series, and some of the concepts that have been built around the subject of giving in Christianity. And the more I read, the more I meditated on these things, it was like, wow, there were just this like pops of knowledge just going off in my mind. And it was like, the more I see, the more I realize it's not just even about tithes, because at the beginning that it felt like that was what it's all about. Christians should not pay tithe. Christians should not pay tithe. But I began to realize, no, that's not really the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter to me was that most of the things, if not practically everything that we've been taught about giving, was essentially wrong, especially in the Nigerian church. And that was what led to the book. The more I discovered, I felt the need to. I have been, until sometime when I took a break, I've been very involved online, but I realized this, I can't just fit in these things into, posts for social media, that I had to get down to work and put these ideas, into a book, something that people can take from, one stage to the other and understand the whole principles around giving, the concepts that I've been taught about giving. And that was how I came up with the book. And the title, I thought about, I'd almost finished writing the book before coming up with the title, because it's just been at the back of my mind that what will be the appropriate title for this? And it just dawned on me on this particular day that looking at the severity of the things that is going on, the nature of the what's being perpetuated in the Nigerian church, that there is really no better name for it than outright fraud. That's what it is. And I now saw that if it is fraud, which is a point I proved in the book, if what's going on is actually fraud, then it is the greatest mass fraud in human history, because there is no other fraud scheme that has been perpetuated over such a long period of time, and over the number of people that this has been, and when you also bring about the monetary worth of that. So it to me it was indisputable that what was going on was the greatest mass fraud ever.
Wow, that's a huge indictment on the Nigerian church. And I'm sure that your book must have raised some eyebrows and made some people to question your Christianity, because that's the first thing that they do in Africa. When you say something that is unorthodox, or when you say something that is not in tune with what they believe, they immediately begin to personally attack you, attack your faith, attack your convictions, in fact, attack your family and everything they can, just because they're not comfortable with the truth. But what has been the reaction since you released this book?
The reaction has been mixed, of course. It's basically, as that's basically been the story of everything. It's always been mixed. From those who have gotten personal emails from people who were, absolutely, telling me how the book has completely, changed their view about giving and about money and financial matters, and the way it's been taught in Christianity. And I've also gotten replies from people who think, how dare you do this? And there are also people who are also in between. There are people who believe that maybe you have some points to make, and it's possible that what you're saying is true. But some of them had issues with words like fraud or fraudulent. They're like, no, it can't.
It's taking it a little too far.
Exactly. So some people had that opinion that you can't really describe what's going on as fraud. But I think so far all the people who have had that opinion have not read the entire book. Maybe there are people who read the preview and just came up with that. But I believe that anyone who actually read the entire book, you can come away with two conclusions. It's either that you believe it changes your perspective about giving, completely changes, and you come to agree with the content of the book, or you completely disagree with the book and the premise and the scriptural analysis that I did in the book. Those are the two things. But if you see the truth in the points that were being made, you will find no reason to criticize the title of the book or to think that what's going on can be classified in any other terms than just what it is, mass fraud.
All right. So before we delve into some of the ideas you spoke about, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who is Isaac Shola, and tell us a little bit of your history. And then before we get to how you got to meet Pastor Sunday and how your mindset began to change, because what has happened to you is not ordinary. Because not many people have a mind change to the point where they begin to write books like you have. So there's a story behind all of this stuff, and that's what we're going to try to unearth right now. So please just give us a brief history of who you are and what your faith life has been like up until meeting Pastor Sunday.
Yes, I'm the usual Christian up till recently. I was brought up in a very conservative Christian background, in a conservative Christian home. And, what you'd expect from the usual Christian family, the regular church attendance and all of that. And
Pentecostal churches, right?
Yes, Deeper Life to be precise.
Oh, wow. All right.
So I knew God personally, I'd come to Jesus on a personal basis. I got saved. And, but
was that in high school or in the university, or when did that happen?
That was in university.
All right. And you were still in the Deeper Life Church?
Yes, but at that time, by the time I was in university, I wasn't associating much with Deeper Life Church anymore.
All right.
I didn't attend Deeper Life on campus.
Okay.
While in the university, so it was still, there was still, maybe once in a while, if you're home, things like that.
So that means you were in Deeper Life all your life. You were born in there, I believe. And then you grew up there, you had your primary school, your high school, and you did not repent whatsoever. You were just being religious until you got to campus, and then you were not as ardent as you were a follower as you were when you were at home. That was when you actually found God?
Close. I wasn't actually born in Deeper Life.
Oh, okay. You later joined?
Yes, as a child.
Okay.
I was still very young when we joined as a family.
All right.
And there were, if you had to be very familiar with Deeper Life teachings to understand some of the things that I would say next.
I'm very familiar with it. My dad was a national overseer.
Wow.
I was born into Deeper Life.
Okay, wow, okay.
Yeah, so go ahead. You're in good company. Here. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I had given my life to Jesus a couple of times in the past. Mm-hmm. So you understand that. But my takeaway growing up in Deeper Life then was that once you're born again, you never do anything wrong. Anything that has the appearance of sin is something you would never do again. You will never be tempted again, and you will never commit sin again. You never do anything wrong. So, growing up as a child, maybe at the age of 9, 10 years, you hear this sermon in church, you give your life to Jesus, you try so hard for the next 3 days. You don't want to talk to anyone, so you don't commit sin. Mm. But after 1 week, it's like you do something and it's like, wow,
well, I messed it up again.
Salvation is gone. Let me just give up till when the conviction comes again. And so that happened a couple of times. So that was a problem for me growing up, because I always felt like every time I did something wrong, God takes away the salvation, so I'm no longer saved. Until, I actually got to university, where I learned that salvation is actually, in spiritual terms, is instantaneous. It's an instantaneous experience.
All right.
But in dealing with the flesh, it's a
So that was on campus now when you were in the university?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. So I got to learn that salvation is a journey, and that you did something wrong and that you fall doesn't mean you should give up and think that, well, salvation is gone. But no, you pick yourself back up,
and then
keep going. That's the journey of the Christian faith. It's not the journey of, I will never do anything wrong again now that I'm saved, I've always believed.
Yeah, your
And
spirit man is
that was
perfect, but not your body. You still have to adjust, learn, grow, and
exactly.
be
So
transformed on a daily
I came
basis.
to very familiar with the journey
All right.
itself and trying to, keep the flesh under control and learning about the dynamics of grace
All right.
and of that. So that was a transformative experience in my life. That knowledge was actually, it was transformative. Maybe if I had
Okay.
not come in contact with that knowledge, I would still be, saved today for 2 weeks or maybe 1 month. And then it's like, oh, you told a lie yesterday, salvation is gone. And I'll still be in that on and off state. But yes, that knowledge helped me, really solidify my faith, helped me grounded in the truth. And that was the beginning of my own personal Christian experience, my personal Christian journey.
All right.
And that's led to, other experiences. I became baptized in the Holy Spirit. That was when I was 7. I served here in Lagos State, Nigeria, and in one of the prayer meetings that we Christian corpus usually have, I prayed for the experience of the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and it was another transformative period in my life. It was something I could never forget.
All right.
And that was, those two things were the building blocks of what I became today. So that continued, and I kept, developing my personal faith and relationship with God until sometime, probably around 2017 or thereabouts, I met with a friend, which we served together, and he introduced me to his fiancée, who happened to, I think, know Pastor Sunday personally. She studied in the UK.
All right.
I don't know how close they were, but he introduced me to Pastor Sunday. And the reason she actually introduced me to Pastor Sunday then was she writes for Pastor Sunday.
Okay.
So she knew that I write.
Okay.
I had written a couple of books. So she was like, oh, you write? Somebody, I know someone who I write for who might have, opportunities for you. You can do this and make some money and all of that. So he introduced me to Pastor Sunday, and that was how I got introduced to Pastor Sunday. I remembered in the first live broadcast I had with him, Pastor Sunday was telling me, I was telling him that I didn't know about him until the lady introduced him to me. And Pastor Sunday was surprised, like, how would you not know me? Because you're a Deeper Life member and you attended Deeper Life for several years. Like, Pastor Kumi comes to my church here in Ukraine, he ministers, and I translate for him right there on the pulpit. And I was like, it's surprising to me too that when I told one of my siblings about Pastor Sunday, he was like, how will I not know Pastor Sunday? That
so all this while, it's like you were just not in the know.
I was looking at him, but yes, he didn't register. I wasn't conscious of, his person, even though I must have attended several, crusades and programs, especially these weekend power night services, some of which were done in his church then in Ukraine, which I remember vividly. I remember clearly attending some of these programs then. Okay. So that was how I got to know Pastor Sunday. So I was introduced. He gave me a couple of ideas which I could develop, and that necessitated my read some of his books and watch some of his sermons, because I was actually doing that to develop the book.
Okay.
But in the process, it was like, wow, these are things that
I'm getting transformed.
Yes, like these are things I've not had before. Wow, and that was how the journey began.
All right.
And yes, it's just been, different levels of transformation ever since.
So it was when you met DSA that you began to question the tithe doctrine. Prior to that time, you were just playing along and just going, with the motions in the church back there in Nigeria, correct?
Yes. Okay. Although, I was having, it wasn't like I could put my finger on it. It's like, I had some issues with Deeper Life where I grew up.
Okay.
It's part of the reason why I kind of tilted away from the church when I got to university.
All right.
In Deeper Life, it wasn't about money. The issue was not about money, although, these issues of tithes, offerings, and everything is everywhere. But my issue with Deeper Life then wasn't about money. It was just, my spirit didn't find, my spirit does not go well with tyranny. When people are trying to dictate every bit and pieces of my life, I wasn't a fan of any form of tyranny, political tyranny, religious tyranny. I tend to, move away from that. So that was my initial issue with Deeper Life. But, living Deeper Life and then trying different churches, so to speak, you attend this church, you attend that church. I started getting introduced to different churches and different ministers and different pastors. They all had their strengths, they had their weaknesses. There was something to learn from each one of them, but there were a few of them that I attended their church, and it was like, wow, the ideas that were being taught and propagated about giving was just so manipulative. You had to be like just willfully blind or just ignorant not to see it. And it was like, I like this person teaching, that's why I came here, but wow, this level of, greed, so to speak, and this covetousness for what belongs to other people was, to me, I found that it was too glaring, and I wasn't comfortable with it. But it was when I met Pastor Sunday that, it was like he began to articulate those feelings that I had that I could not really rationally articulate. It was,
At the
coming
time.
in contact with his teachings. So it was now like, yes, this. So it was like meeting someone of a kindred spirit, so to speak, to use the word I used before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, wow, I knew something was wrong here. Thank you for putting a finger on it. And that was how, the role that Pastor Sunday has played, which is a really massive role.
Fantastic. I can definitely relate to what you're saying because I had a similar experience. When I met him, it was as if he was voicing the inner pain and concerns that I had that I could not articulate for myself. If you had asked me at the time what was wrong, I wouldn't have been able to tell you per se. But when he started talking, when I started reading his books, I started feeling like, oh yeah, finally things were clicking into place. And it was like he was just articulating, breaking down, and explaining in great detail what I was feeling on the inside. So I can definitely understand the way you were feeling when you were going to all of those churches and how you were uncomfortable with the giving and the tithe and the overemphasis that they lay on sowing seeds and tithes and all that. There's nothing wrong with tithe and offering, like you're going to be explaining today, but it's that when things get to the extreme, abuse, steps in, manipulation steps in, and when greed is now your motivation instead of love for people and love for God, then there is a problem that begins to rear its ugly head, and that is what has brought about most of the abuse. So, can you tell us some of the things you've written in your book that most people don't realize about tithe and offering? What are some of the secrets that you have unearthed that you think people need to know that is not common knowledge about tithe and offering? Just give us a few of them. Maybe let's start with the first one. Let's go with that.
Okay. In my while thinking about this subject, it was like there were different levels of analysis. There was the concepts, the tithe, the offering, the first fruit, and the seeds. Mm-hmm. So those were on a plane, and I was trying to understand those ideas, how they were actually instantiated in the Bible, and how they are being practiced or taught or implemented today. Trying to find like a correlation or understand the correlation, the disparity. I was trying to understand the relationship between those two. Mm-hmm. But while I was trying to do that, I now discovered that beyond just the concepts, there are certain fundamental beliefs which actually underline those concepts themselves, which are like so wrong. And I think it's those beliefs that actually, I would say, make the power of this concept so strong. You know, the hold of this, the deceptions that have been created around these concepts, they are strong because of the underlying beliefs, which are false. And the first belief that I actually came across, which was this, that contrary to popular opinion, that giving to religious giving is not actually equivalent to giving to God. It was one of those discoveries that I came to that was like, wow, just completely shocking. You know, we've been taught that whatever you give within the four walls of a church building has been given to God. And I realized that, no, that was actually false. And, you know, and it was even shocking to me that we believe that and that we teach that, because, you know, it was so clear and glaring in the Bible. There was so many instances, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, which actually show or prove that the way to give to God is by giving to the poor or to people in need. So that's one of the, like, you know, the beliefs that I came to realize that was false. A very fundamental belief which I realized was false. Now, it's not the same as saying you can't give to church or you can't give religious, you know, to religious organizations or to ministries and to all of that, which is a point I actually made in the book clearly. No one is saying you shouldn't give to church, you shouldn't give to pastors, you shouldn't give to ministries. I believe that they need money to do the things that they do, and without money, everything they do grinds to a halt, except if the pastor is some kind of a business mogul who can, you know, self-fund whatever it is that he's trying to do. But for the most part, they are not. So, yes, I understand the need to give, but equating that to mean giving to God was the lie that people have been taught to believe, which was one of the things that I actually tried to really expose and denounce in the book. Another thing that I come to realize also was the idea, the general idea, that whatever is given to God, whatever is given in the church, religious giving that is made in the church, is given to God, and it attracts blessing from God. That was something else that I also discovered. No, it's actually also not true. And the Bible also made it clear, you know, several verses from the Bible, you know, it says the one who gives to the poor will never lack. You know, it talks about, and even one of the verses from the New Testament, in one of Paul's letter, where it talks about he that sows sparingly will reap sparingly, and he that you know, sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. And people have termed that to I don't know, people now weave that into this whole seed doctrine, which I don't understand. And you read that verse in context, and what it was just saying was simple. It was talking about giving to meet the necessity of the saints. That was the very first verse of that chapter. It says, regarding the necessity of the saints, that it is superfluous for me to write unto you. One translation actually, you know, said it specifically. It said, regarding the needs of poor Christians. I mean, it was so explicit, like you can't even mistake it for something else.
All right.
So those are the two of, like, the fundamental beliefs that I discovered that were false. And I believe that those beliefs, those false beliefs, are the things that make the concepts of these false concepts of New Testament tithing and offerings of money and first fruits of money and seeds of money. These are the false beliefs that actually enable these things to thrive. So those were the beliefs that apart from, you know, countering those concepts, I gave a lot of time to actually proving the falsity of those beliefs. And
All right. Before you go forward,
okay,
let me try to see if we can highlight those things for the viewers. The first one that you realized was that giving to God and giving to the church and giving to the poor were different things. Is that correct?
yes,
All right. Before they made it look like it was one thing, which is you're giving to God.
yes.
So,
Before, even the poor was rarely mentioned. I'm
aha.
not very familiar with. They just, all the giving you hear about in church, even though all the emphasis, most of the emphasis on giving in the Bible were all on the poor and on the needy, widows, orphans, and all of that, but you rarely hear that in church. So all the talks about, sermons about giving and all of that was simply about religious giving done in church, and that was equated to mean giving to God.
But you realize that whatever you give in church was not necessarily given to the poor and was not necessarily given to God.
No, it wasn't given to God.
Fantastic.
Yes,
Then the second idea that blew your mind was you realized that this whole concept of giving to God so you can get blessings in return was not exactly the way the Bible described it, correct?
exactly.
All right. So when you realized these things and you began to talk to people about them, did they begin to see things your way?
No,
No, they didn't,
no.
because it took them
Um,
time to get to where they were, and it would take some time for them to,
yes,
begin to break out of that. So you said
yes,
these two concepts are what has made the fallacy of the tithe and offering, or the abuse that we have in the tithe and offering sector of the church right now, to be as prevalent as it is. So what was the
yes.
cure, or what exactly do you see as the counter idea to what is being done right now? If one of these GOs was to call you and say, give us a snippet from your book of how you think we can adjust our teaching to be able to fit into what the Bible actually said, not what we have been teaching in the past, what would you say to them?
I would say simple that the Bible was very clear that the purpose of giving is to meet a need. This point I took time to really prove and actually repeat this point, emphatically in the book, that the purpose of giving is
Please
to
put the
meet
book.
a need.
Go
Now,
ahead. What is
there
that
were,
need?
you said,
I
you
said, what
said,
is the need?
no, the need could be anything.
Okay.
It's just, when I was talking earlier, I was talking about that this is not about saying, oh, people should not give to churches anymore. Don't ever support any ministry. Don't give to, or if you give, if you support any ministry, that's somehow wrong. No, that's not the point. So the point is you give to meet a need. And I think one of the reasons why there was this emphasis on giving to the poor in the scriptures is because the poor, they are in need. That's why the Bible actually emphasized giving to the poor, because they were a category of people who were in need, who had things that in their lives that they could do. They could use a help in their life. So I think that's the reason why the Bible made so much emphasis on giving to the poor. But if you also look at the Bible, there are other times in the Bible where there is a call for people to give. For instance, in the journey of the Israelites from the land of Egypt to Canaan, there was a time when they had to build a tabernacle, and God instructed Moses to tell them to give towards that. There was a need, and then they were told to give to meet that need. And if you look at the Bible, when that need was met, they were told to stop giving, which shows evidently that the reason why they gave was to meet needs. And it's also why things like, tithes was also established in the nation of Israel. It was simply so that the needs of a certain category of Israelites could be met. And what were those categories? They were the Levites. The Levites, God made a pact with them. He made a covenant with them. And in that covenant, it was that they were going to serve God in the temple, and that they were also going to be like, public servants for the nation of Israel. So they were not allowed to engage in economic activities, to own lands and to own animals, to cultivate and all of that. They were not permitted to engage in any of those activities. So, and in a culture, 3,000 years ago, where basically everything was agrarian, they had to be able to fend for themselves some way. And that was why God enacted the tithing system. So, and God didn't just establish it for the Levites. He also included the poor, the widows, the fatherless, and all of that. He included them in that pact. And the reason was simple. These were people in need. So I believe that giving, whether you're giving to individuals or whether you're giving to organizations, and organizations could be religious organizations, like giving to, a ministry or a church, and the organization could even be political. If someone is running for office, people support politicians with money. There is a need there. They need money to do certain things. So you give to meet those needs. But the sense where people have been taught in Christendom that giving is arbitrary. You don't have to see a need in a ministry or in a pastor or in anywhere. You give to them because God mandates you to give to them, whether they need it or not. Whether there are people dying of poverty, dying of hunger around you, no, their own needs is secondary. This super wealthy ministry with this super, multi-millionaire pastor or GO or whatever is the one you should give to first, regardless of the needs around you. Now, because the purpose or the motive for giving has been thwarted, so it made those kind of, just completely appalling practices and teachings to just go on unchecked. So if I would say to anyone, to any minister, any pastor today who is actually interested in the truth, I would say to them, talk about giving in the context of your needs. Tell people you need money. Everybody knows you need money. It's okay. You need money to do the things that you need to do. You need money, you want to preach on TV. You need money to do that. If you believe you really want to do that. And there are people who believe in what you believe. They agree with your vision or all that. Of course, they should give to support you to do whatever it is that you need to do. But making yourself the focal point of Christian giving and making Christians feel like you are entitled to a certain portion of their money or a certain amount from them on a regular basis till the day they die, whether or not you need the money, whether or not your bank account is ripping apart with funds, whether or not you have any need, even when you don't have the need, that sense of entitlement is what's actually wrong. And I think that sense of entitlement was displayed a lot, during this period, with the whole global pandemic and, the usual, it's not business as usual. We are hoping that it's just for the meantime. But people are still creating, avenues for people to give, even though the churches are locked, there is no program going on, they are not flying around the world, organizing crusade, doing anything. So it's like, that sense of entitlement is just what's wrong. Even when there is no need, it's like, no, you have to give. And the way they get people hooked is with the second lie. You give to be blessed. That's completely wrong. I think you give to a place of need. Now, God can decide to reward you in whichever way he chose to. It could be in this life, it could be in the next. It may not even be in this life. Jesus told the rich young ruler who came to him, he said, sell everything you have, give to the poor. He says, and you will have treasure in heaven. He said, then follow me. He didn't say, sell all you have, give to the poor, and then wait 7 days and see how much you see in your account. Or wait and see what God will do in your life within the next 2 weeks. No. That scenario was Jesus expressly telling the man, your reward is not going to be here. There is treasure waiting for you in heaven. Sell it, give it to the poor, and then follow me. When you get to heaven, you meet your reward and your treasures there. So how or when God decides to reward us for our giving is not our business. And anyone who tells you they know exactly how God is going to reward you, your giving, is lying. Oh, if you give this particular amount, you receive tenfold within the next 7 days. That's an obvious lie. The person is not God. Is it the rewarder of those that... that's people making themselves into deities, into gods of themselves. That, because that has there's just no basis to make such an outrageous and outlandish promise to anyone. It's false, and it's just based on a lie. And so that's the summary. Yes. Yes, it's on Amazon.
All right. And then you have it on which other platforms?
There's a website I designed for the book, thegreatestmassfraudever.com.
All right, thegreatestmassfraudever.com.
Because Nigerians can buy on Amazon, but they can get it on that website.
All right, all right. So those of you who are listening, if you want to get this book and have an enlightenment and a deeper understanding of what we're talking about, please go to this website. Either you go to amazon.com or you go to thegreatestmassfraudever.com, and you'll be able to purchase the book, especially for those of you in Nigeria and in Africa. You'll be able to get it, and I believe it can be delivered. Is it just in the e-copy, or you started printing the hardcovers?
No, I haven't started printing the hard copies yet. It's just available as an ebook for now.
As an ebook for now, okay.
Yes.
So guys, take advantage of the ebook version and read up and let us know. You will see his contact inside, and write to him and let him know how you feel and your concerns, your comments, and the rest. He's also on social media. He's on Facebook, and his email is also there, so you can find him. All right, so when I went through the book, I saw that you were able to differentiate between the Levites and pastors of today, and why there's no direct correlation between the way they were treated as Levites and how people are treated today and how they handle tithe today. So can you please just shed a little light on that for our viewers?
Yes. I think, the points, just relating to the point I made earlier, it was a pact. God made, it was a particular tribe. It wasn't, the Levite priesthood isn't something that you just get called into arbitrarily. I was praying and God called me to be a Levite. No, it's a particular bloodline. Mm-hmm. It's, you belong to that bloodline and you are automatically a Levite. And there was a purpose to their existence. It was primarily to serve God in the temple, but this is an entire tribe. It's not just a few number of people. So all of them can't just be serving in the temple. So there was also the public service, this public service dimension to it. So I actually made the point in the book that the Levites are actually people you could call public servants of today. The people who serve the public, or the civil servants of today. That's actually the closest, correlation between the Levites and, modern day, because we're talking about a nation. Israel was a nation. It wasn't a religious sect. It wasn't a ministry. It wasn't a church. It was a nation. And a particular group of that nation was to act as the public servants. So, but there was a radical transformation between the Old and the New Testament. And this transformation happened when Jesus drew his last breath on the cross. And the curtain that, divided the Holy of Holies from the holy place and from public access was torn apart. And from that moment in time, anybody could access God. There was direct access for everyone to the Holy of Holies. So that means everyone has a direct access to God. So now that does not negate the callings, the apostolic callings.
The fivefold ministry in the church.
Yes, and the fivefold ministries in the church. But the nature of the apostolic calling and the fivefold ministries in the church is very different. Very different. In that today it's not a particular sect that it's called and forbidden to work. It's very different today. So in the modern day, God calls people into there are different kind of apostolic callings that God calls people into. And when that calling happens, you can decide to give your life devotedly to that calling. People like Paul and many of the apostles did that. But even in the case of people like Paul, even though his life was radically transformed in terms of his professional life, he was a Pharisee, an expert of the law before he met with Jesus. But after he met with Jesus, he still made an effort and a commitment on his own part not to rely on maybe people's free will giving or something like that for his own personal sustenance. Instead, he decided to work with his own hands and to support not just himself, but even the people who were working with him. Now, he advised the elders of the church to also do the same. He made that advice in the book of Acts. But even in cases where people feel like they can't do both of those things, that they cannot
work and also pursue the ministry responsibilities.
Exactly. You can ask or solicit for assistance. It's okay. But it can't be on the basis of the tithing system, because the tithing system had a particular context through which it was actually enacted in the Old Testament. So that's the difference between the Levitical priesthood and then apostolic callings.
You also talked about, okay, that's fantastic, but you also alluded to their lifestyle and how those who are Levites today are living compared to those in the Old Testament. Can you remember that?
Yes.
Please share that, because that's something I found interesting. Hello? Hi guys, I guess we lost him for a second. So before he gets back, please go to Amazon.com and get this book, The Greatest Mass Fraud Ever, and realize that a lot of things that has been told to you about giving is wrong. And when you start reading and understanding and doing research for yourself, your eyes will begin to open and you'll quickly realize that a lot of what you've heard is not true. And I've seen a lot of teachings all through the years in my time in different churches and ministries, and it's all geared towards giving to the church and giving to the pastor, but there was no emphasis on the widow, on the poor, on the orphans. And Jesus Christ made it very clear. He said, give to me. That is, he said, those who take care of those in the prisons, to the poor. He said he identified with those people, and he said that was what it meant to actually give to him, which is being tossed aside today in the church, and most people don't pay attention to that. I can count how many ministries I've seen who generally have prison ministries, or who generally have ministries for orphans, and who generally have ministries for widows. Now, I'm not talking about ceremonies where they gather widows maybe once in 6 months or once in a year, and they help them out with stuff. I'm talking about on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, making sure that the Bible says there are always going to be the poor among you, but they should always know that this church is a place where I can find solace. This church is a place where my needs would be met. This church is a place where when I go, I'm sure that I will get some kind of answer. And I don't mean spiritual answers. I mean tangible, physical answers. Because when somebody is hungry, even the Bible says it, when somebody is hungry, when somebody is in need of a material thing, you shouldn't go around speaking in tongues and praying to them and laying hands on them, but you should provide them with the physical things that they need if you can afford to do so. And that is the primary reason why tithes and offerings were instituted. It wasn't just about building churches and building cathedrals and domes and building an empire for the pastors of the church, but it's supposed to be for taking care of those who are down and out in the society. Pastor Sunday did the same here. He said the millionaires in his church were not actually giving tithes to him. What they were doing was that he said that he doesn't want any hungry person in Kyiv, the central city of Ukraine, to go hungry. So what he decided to do was set up a soup kitchen where at least 2,000 people will be fed every single day. And so the millionaires in the church were encouraged to channel their funds and their tithes and their offerings to actually accomplishing that goal. Because like our guest has said, giving is supposed to meet a need. And there was a need of people in the society who were hungry to be fed. And instead of these guys bringing their tithe to church and just using it as a way to fund the larger than life lifestyle of the pastor, which is the case in most places, what they did was they said, we're going to meet the need of feeding people. And in 8 years, they were able to feed millions of people in Ukraine. I think the number was over 8 million, people in Kyiv, Ukraine were fed. Now, that is the purpose of tithe and offering. It is to meet the needs of the people. It's to meet the needs of the community. It is to make sure that those who are suffering are not left alone. But surprisingly, in Africa, we bypass all of these people who are suffering and we go to church with our big offerings and we give it to the church and then we say, oh, we've given to God. But that is different from giving to people. Our tithes are not just supposed to be given to God per se and taking it to the church. It's supposed to be given to people who need it. Widows are all over the place in our country. They are suffering. Many of them have been taken advantage of because they've suddenly lost their partners. And many of them don't have skills that they can use to fend for themselves. And a lot of people are taking advantage of them because they have to take care of their kids. But that's not supposed to be the case. The church is supposed to stand in to make sure nobody gets taken advantage of. It doesn't matter if the person is a member of your church. It doesn't matter if the person is a member of your tribe. Or it doesn't matter if the person lives around you. We're supposed to reach out as much as we can to as many people as we can who fall into the category of people who are in need. Orphans are all over the place. I was privileged to grow up with parents who constantly took us to orphanage homes and made us to give. And that's a tradition that I've continued, even if I'm not doing it as much as I would like to right now. But it's something that is going to be an integral part of whatever it is that God will have me do in the future, because these are the people who God and Jesus associated himself with. Jesus never said that I am like the priest or I am like the Pharisees. He said, I am just like the people who are in prisons. He said, when you visit these people, you're visiting me. He says, when you feed these people, you're feeding me. He said, when you give these people clothes to wear who are naked, you're clothing me. He didn't say the same thing for other people who were high and mighty in society. If you want to see more of these teachings, which is very extensive, what I'm saying to you is a condensed version of an entire series that DSA has done. Go on Dr. Sunday Adelaja page on YouTube and go to the series that has to do with tithe and offering, and just start from the beginning and just keep listening up until the very end. And I can assure you that you will be completely detoxified. And you can read the greatest of mass fraud ever for you to also gain some more knowledge, because he brings in new concepts, and he tries to explain in more vivid terms, how this whole thing can be sorted out and how people can be liberated. Giving is important, but productive giving is what's best. And sadly, a lot of people are not giving productively. A lot of people are brainwashed. A lot of people have been deceived and hoodwinked. I believe that genuinely there are some people who are, some pastors are genuinely ignorant of the truth, but I believe that there are some who are doing it intentionally and taking advantage of God's people, and that needs to stop. You need to be able to find out the truth for yourself and liberate yourself from the bondage and the stronghold that a lot of the religious people in Nigeria have kept us. So it's up to you. The Bible says, my people perish. God was lamenting in the Bible and he said, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge is doing a bigger harm than even the devil himself, because the devil doesn't really have to do much. All he has to do is just sit back and watch the Christians who have refused to be like the Bereans, who have refused to study, who have refused to research, who have refused to question things and ask and, demand for answers for some of these simple questions. In fact, they just go with the orthodoxy, and they just go with the flow. Whatever they're told by their pastor, they're like, oh yes, I believe. Nobody is going back to see if these things are truly so. And if you continue that way, you will continue down the path of falsehood, frustration, and at the end of the day, you will hear what Jesus Christ said, which is, depart from me because you walk iniquity. You did not take care of me. And you will be like, oh, but that's not what my pastor taught me. Jesus is not going to take excuses. God is not going to say, hey, because your pastor taught you wrong, then that means that you get a pass. No, it is your responsibility as a Christian, as somebody who Jesus died for, who has the Bible, who has the Holy Spirit, to be able to seek this truth out. And I believe that as you do so, you will be liberated. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't fall behind. Make sure you engage fully with this book, engage with DSS teachings on tithe and offering, and begin to give more productively, more intentionally, and with joy. That freedom in giving is important. Once you don't have that, whatever you're doing out of coercion and fear, and it's not something that God is interested in. So, please, do we have our guest back?
Yes.
Hello, Isaac, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, we lost you for a second there, and I believe your internet went off. So welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Let's
Sorry
take
about
it.
the break.
No problem. Let's take it from here. One of the things I read in your book was the liberation that is needed from the spirit of fear as regards tithe and offering. So talk to us about the fear factor that is being used to manipulate people and how people can be set free from it.
It's one of the biggest problems too about the way that the subject of giving is being instantiated in Christianity. Mm-hmm. When you understand giving from the perspective of meeting needs, you don't need fear. You understand? That's a giving motivated by love. You see somebody.
Well, what about the cause that they speak about in Malachi?
Yes, I was going there.
Okay.
Yes. So, but because the motive of giving has been completely corrupted, it has been thwarted, it's been, giving has been depicted to mean something it does not even mean at all. Mm-hmm. So people now need to come up with gimmicks and manipulative techniques to get people to give. And one of the tools that is being deployed the most is the tool of fear. And it's unfortunate because anybody who really understands the concept of, the Christianity and how it is based on love will understand that fear has no place in love, and that perfect love casts out fear. So, right. But one of the most potent tool of fear that is being used is actually the tool of fear, using the Malachi curse. In Malachi chapter 3, when it says that you are cursed with a curse. Mm-hmm. So people have used this to mean so many things that it doesn't actually mean. I also used to believe that if God is waiting for your tithe, in church on Sunday morning, and if you delay it or you don't bring it or anything like that, then you come under a curse. But then, at first I realized that it wasn't a curse on individuals. That's the first, misapplication of that verse and the misunderstanding of that verse. It's not a curse on individuals, it's a curse on a nation. It was a curse on a nation. So it says that you are cursed with a curse, this whole nation. So the idea there is that the entire nation is cursed with a curse because that the poor and the needy of the land are not being catered for through tithing. So it wasn't really about, the individual act of tithing per se. It was really about the fact that the poor, the needy, and the people for whom the tithe, were intended, the widows, the orphans, and all of that, they were not being taken care of. So it means that when the poor are not being taken care of, when people are going hungry, when the needy, no one cares about the needy in the nation comes under a curse. So that's actually what the Malachi curse there was referring to. And when you read further, you read about the description of the curse and even the blessings that come also when tithes are being paid and the people who need the tithes are properly taken care of. It all talks in terms of a national identity. It says, other nations will call you blessed. It's not you as an individual. It's saying other nations of the world will call your nation. And in this particular instance, it was talking to the Jewish nation of Israel. So it was saying other nations around the world will see you, the Jewish nation, and call you blessed. And he talked about how, you open the windows of heaven, which was talking about literal rain. There won't be famine, there won't be starvation on the land, on the nation, so that everyone is taken care of. So it wasn't an individual cause. It was a national cause. That's one of the things that I got to learn about the nature of the Malachi cause that completely, changed my, orientation about the issue of tithing and the Malachi cause. And it opened my eyes to how blatant the tool of fear is being used and how that, that passage has just been used in the most, just, I don't know how to describe
in the
it.
most egregious way,
manipulative way, to get people to part with 10% of their income.
All right.
And it's
so how do you think that people can be set free from it? What will you tell them? Will you tell them that you're not under a curse, there's nothing to fear? Or will you tell them that they should keep giving so that God would open the windows of heaven, per se?
Okay. I think the first thing that people need to get out of their mind is that I'm looking for I want to give to be blessed. I think that people should first get that out of their mind. You should be looking for a need to meet. That's all you should be looking for. Your giving should be directed at meeting a need. Now, when people usually talk about Christians should not pay tithe, I think there is a way in which it's limited. It's just limited, okay, don't pay tithe. Like, okay, end of story. You shouldn't pay tithe, end of story. But I think tithing, the system of tithing, the way it was, instantiated in the Old Testament, is outdated. It's no longer binding. We don't need to keep doing that. Now, if a nation decides to adopt that system as its own taxation policy, that's a different thing. But to remove it from the context of a nation in which it was actually used and in which it was created, and to now establish it in the context of a religious sect or a ministry or a church, I think that's a very wrong application of it. Now, the fact that tithing as a practice has been abolished in the Old Testament does not mean that the purpose for which tithing was created, God has lost interest in it. God is still very much interested in ensuring that the poor, the needy, widows, orphans, strangers, and people who cannot fend for themselves, God is still very much interested in their welfare. Now, it doesn't have to be through tithing, but we still have to give to support these people, or at least give to organizations whose purpose is to support these people, this category of people. So I think that's the balance that has to be brought in. So to just tell people, you're no longer under a curse. The Malachi curse is different from the curse of the law, which was talked about in Deuteronomy, which was actually a curse on individuals. If you don't obey these laws to follow after them, curse shall you be in your way out, curse shall you be when you come in. All that was talked about in Deuteronomy. That was directed at individuals. Like you have to keep the law, and if you don't, that was the curse of the law. Now, Jesus died to save us from that curse, the curse of the law. But there is a sense in which a nation or a society also comes under a curse, which is very different from the curse that Jesus died to save us from. And that curse is, it plays out when people don't have love in their heart for their fellow human beings, when there is no sense of of love and a need or a desire to meet people at the point of their needs and to give to the poor and to support the weak and the underprivileged. So I think that's very important. So what I would say to people, it's simple. Start giving to the place of needs. You see an organization that has a need, religious organization, the ministry you attend, whatever, all of that, you can give to support that ministry. And every other place you see needs, the poor, orphans, the widows, give to support those too. You have a politician, you know who you can vouch for, who is a person of integrity, who you know wants the best for the society. You help them. And that's part of the, this corruption of the concept of giving is part of all the problems that we see. People rarely give, normal Nigerians rarely give to support politicians or to support politics. So the only people who are playing politics are the people who have amassed money, from the government. You get into power, you loot as much funds as you can loot, and then you use those money to run campaign and to do everything you need to do. But if a good person who actually wants to do the right thing wants to run, the chances of them winning, especially when it comes to getting support, financial support, is slim to none. And without that kind of financial support, even though there is an obvious need for it, but because people don't care about giving to meet needs, then it's very unlikely that we'll have any real change in the polity.
All right. So I hope that is clear to our viewers and those living in fear. I hope that you now begin to understand that there is nothing really to fear. All you have to do is obey what the Bible says, which is you should give, and which is you should take care of those who are in need around you, and you would not have to worry about all the the fear factor that has been put into you in your church system and what have you, because the cause that the Bible talks about is more of a cause and effect thing. And any society that neglects the poor automatically becomes a chaotic society. You will have high crime rates, you will have a lot of mothers, you have a lot of despair, you have a lot of depression. And in fact, we can even say in Nigeria right now that it's almost like we're cursed, because a lot of people lose their lives daily. A lot of people are in despair. There are no jobs. The economy is nothing to write home about. But the moment we begin to prioritize taking care of the poor and lifting everybody up, it will lift the society, it will lift the economy, and the effect will be felt in every sector of the society. What do you think?
That's true. That's very true. There was a particular on the subject, on the chapter rather, where I discussed the Malachi curse. I actually talked about symptoms of the curse, and it was part of the things that I discussed. I'm sure that there is a spiritual implication of not just even not give. It's one thing that you're not giving to the poor. That's one thing. You're not giving to the poor. God said, created the tithing system for the poor, for the needy, for the widows and orphans and all of that. In the New Testament, Jesus himself, reiterated that point. Told people to give to the poor. The letters of Paul, like I mentioned earlier, talked about giving to poor Christians. But Nigerian Christianity took it a step further. It's not just that we are not giving to the poor, we are actually robbing the poor, literally. So things like the concept of tithing, which was actually created to take care of the poor, because the purpose has been defeated or has been twisted and thwarted. Now, people can collect tithes from the same people for whom the tithe was even meant for in the first place. So the tithe was meant for the poor. Instead, people are collecting tithes from the poor. The tithe were meant for widows. People are collecting tithes from widows. The tithe were meant for the fatherless or the orphans. People are collecting tithes from all this category of people. So it's not just that they are denying, the poor of the necessary assistance that they need. Is that we're actually now going out of our way to actually rob them of the little that they have. And people take this to all sorts of extreme levels, especially when it comes to things like the seed. These teachings about seed, where people are even told, you need a job, empty your account, everything you have. If all you have now is what is going to be transport for you to get home, give it and see what God will do. You know, all sort of wicked practices are going on. And I believe there are spiritual implications for this on the society and on the nation. But even apart from the spiritual implications, if you just look at, the economic impact of this kind of practices, and just you look at it based on just reason, and rationality, you see that this kind of practices will literally ruin a nation's economy. It will literally ruin a nation's economy, because there is a concentration of wealth in the hands of people who don't create value. They are not creating any economic value, and there is, because of the way the money comes in, the ease with which the money comes in, there is very little restriction or reason for them not to just send as much money as they want to into export, in terms of, acquiring jets and the foreign contractors who are building all the mega structures and all of that. So it's like people are giving for other people to just go and give to the jet manufacturing company in some other country, So there's this massive exploitation of wealth through the channel of the church, buying structures they don't need in different countries, and they lose those structures. They don't even care. They try to play games with the government of other countries. They get them, they impound their money, they impound their buildings, things that they collected money from the people of the poorest nation, like the nation with the poorest amount of poor people in the world. Like Nigeria is number one currently. And you collect money from these poor people, and then you just, take and you waste it. So that has a direct impact on the economy of a nation. But more than just that direct impact, there is also the spiritual implication. A nation that robs the poor will come under a curse. I think that's the message of Malachi chapter 3. And I think that's very evident in a country like Nigeria. You cannot see Nigeria and not think that this is a nation that is operating under a curse.
True. So if you have one message for our viewers on why they need to read your book, what would that message be?
The message is simple. People have been hearing a lot about tithes and about offerings and about first fruit and seeds and all of these things. My message to people would be that if you really want to understand God's view on these things, read the book. If you want to understand what the balanced scriptural perspective is on the concepts of tithes, offerings, first fruit and seeds, and the general idea of giving in Christianity, if you want to really understand God's heart about giving, and you want to understand the scriptural stand on giving, then you would want to read this book, because this book would open your eyes to really understand the purpose of giving. It will open your eyes to understand how not to be manipulated. It will unshackle you from the yoke of legalistic giving, this religious legalistic giving, and it will open your eyes to how to give God's way. That will be my message to people to read about this book. And I think this is going to have tremendous impact on our lives as individuals, because number one, the Bible actually said in the book of Romans that the person who gives to the rich will come to want. He says that oppress the poor to increase his riches, and he who gives to the rich will come to want. So literally, giving to the rich brings you under a curse. So you just suppose that with giving to the poor and to people in need, which is what actually gets people blessed. So I help people in the book. I explain these things, and I think the reader, anyone who picks this book and reads, will be able to understand the differences, how to actually give God's way. Even if your purpose for giving, if all you care about when it comes to giving is giving to be blessed, the way to actually give to be blessed is actually in that book. And the book is going to have I believe the impact of the book is going to be massive, both on individuals and also on the society as a whole.
All right, fantastic. You guys heard it from the author himself. Hope you listen to him and you get the book and transform your mind and transform your way of thinking. Those of you who think that you know it all or you're good in where you currently are, trust me, there is more to be discovered and there's more knowledge to be gained. So you want to gain more knowledge by reading this book. So finally, before you go, I want to just ask you a question that I'm sure is on the minds of a lot of people. Can giving actually make people rich?
I didn't get that.
Can giving make people rich?
No.
Aha.
Absolutely not. I think the idea that giving is what makes people rich, it has no scriptural basis. Now, like I said earlier, God promised that blessings, that he was going to bless people who give. Now, how God chooses to bless is left to God to decide. But you can make the case that giving can that maybe giving, I'm not sure, but that maybe giving can guarantee, the idea that givers never lack. Mm-hmm. You understand? There is a sense in which the Bible also talks about, about the people who give, that when they also are in need, God will come to their rescue. Mm-hmm. I think that's what really is most important to God, is needs. That's the most important thing to God. And I think that when we give ourselves, then God is more inclined to also, really come to our rescue in our own time of need. So it's not give to be blessed, really, or give to be rich, rather. God does not run a get rich quick scheme where you can give 1,000 and then get 10,000 in 7 days. Like, no, God is not in the business. God is not in that business. So giving to the rich is a complete misapplication and thwarting of the scriptures. God's instruction for wealth is simple: the hand of the diligent maketh rich.
All right, fantastic. So you heard it here, the hand of the diligent makes rich. It is diligence in service, production of goods, and being very good at, or excellent and diligent in what you do, that creates wealth. It's not given. So those of you who believe that givers never lack, I've seen a lot of givers that absolutely lack, and in fact they lack to the point of borrowing. And they became, they went from just being poor now to being in debt. And that's one of the worst things that you can be. If you're poor and you're still getting on and trying to, make ends meet, we can still keep encouraging you. But if you're now in massive debt, that makes your problems to be double. So just giving is not enough. You have to be able to be excellent and diligent in what you do. You have to understand the laws of money. You have to understand the way money works, the way business works, the way, creation of wealth is brought about. It's an entirely new system, and that is how you grow wealth. And I like something you wrote in your book. You try to explain how Abraham came up with the concept of tithing and how it was not about God. It was not about him being prompted to do it. He just did it out of his own form of gratitude. And that is how it began. And when you read this book, you'll be able to understand the history of tithing and how we've gone from where, tithing began to where we are today, and to help to correct all the negative notions that anybody who is viewing us today would have. And I believe that, like you've said, it will help to transform the Nigerian system. It will transform you as a person. It will transform your way of thinking. It will transform your approach to giving, which will transform the lives of other people as well, and then it to cascade into transforming an entire generation of people. And I believe that is something that we desperately need, because the number one problem I think we have in Nigeria is the problem of the wrong mindset. We're very uninformed. We have, in fact, and the things we even claim to know, most of it is wrong. They are half-truths or they are completely non-truths and false, and those things need to be changed, and I think this book is going to do a lot of that changing. So any final words from you, the author, before you leave today?
Yes, I would just say that there is a lot of things that is wrong with the way that Christianity has been taught and the way Christianity is being presented to us, especially in this part of the world. And I think it's actually crippled Christianity in its ability to actually transform lives and transform nations. And I think this is one place for us to start. This is not the only place that, you know, this kind of false practices and teachings are actually causing havoc. This is not the only area, but I think this is a very good place for us to start. And one takeaway is this: I want people to understand that our lives, actually as individuals, and the destiny of our societies or the nation, and actually our own personal eternal destinies, is also really hanging on this. You know, Jesus said, in one of his sermons, he talked about, you know, that at the last day he's going to tell the people on his left that you saw me hungry, you saw me thirsty, you saw me naked, and you didn't do anything about it. And those people said, when did we see you? And he said, because you've not done it to the least of this, you've not done it unto me. So I think that it's a very critical point that Jesus made there, that he was tying our giving to the poor, our giving to the needy, and giving to meet people's need. He was tying that directly with our own eternal fate at the end of our lives. I think that's a very important, something that is very frequently overlooked in our sermons, and I think it should be a very important part in our discussions about giving. So this is very important. It's important to us as individuals, and it's important to our society and to our nation.
Change in Nigeria, I believe it will also affect, it will have a ripple effect all across the continent of Africa.
Exactly. Especially sub-Saharan Africa. It's a mirror of what's happening in Nigeria. I think sub-Saharan Africa cannot get it right until Nigeria gets it right. You're very correct. It's going to, the effect of this on this country is going to cascade across the entire continent.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming, Isaac Shola, and I want to say a very big well done to you. Double thumbs up for writing this book and putting out these ideas for a lot of young people and people of every age or creed. And I think that those who read this book will never remain the same, because it's a complete departure from what we've been used to. And there is no way there will be no transformations in the mind of a genuine seeker of truth who picks up this book. So I encourage everyone to please do that. And I'm sure that you will have testimonies right after reading the book, and our society will begin to get changed, because all it takes is one person to start that change like you've done. And as we touch each other, it will become something that would become a national movement someday, hopefully soon rather than later. So thank you very much for coming. Have a nice day, and we look forward to you writing a lot more books, and we'll be here to also review them with you. So God bless. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard from Isaac Shola about the greatest fraud ever, and it has to do with tithes, offerings, first fruits, and seeds. Now, it's not because any of these things are wrong on their own, but the teachings and the way they've been used to manipulate Christians is very wrong. And if you read this book that he has written down, I can assure you that your eyes will be opened and you have the comprehensive truth as to how to break out of this brainwashing that has gone on for such a long time. And you'll be able to break out of the falsehood, and you'll be able to give freely with love and in an effective way that will really bring about joy, not just in you, but will be able to bring about joy in society. If you want to become rich, it's not about giving, it's about learning the laws of money. And there is a program right now that DSA is running, a mentorship group, and it's called Money. It's based on the book Money Will Make You Rich, which you can get on Amazon. And it's also based on, his teachings on finance. You can get some of those teachings on YouTube, and it will help to change the way you see money. So if you want to become a millionaire, please join the Millionaires Mentorship Group, and you will be blessed that you did. Because most people I've met want to be rich, but most of them don't know how. This mentorship group is going to show you how. And if you want to read books, of course, you would be told of some of these books, but I've been asked by a few people of late where they can get books on money, like Money Will Make You Rich, How to Break Away from Uncle Sam. You can get those books on Amazon. You can get them on dsabooksplanet.com for those of you who are in Nigeria. And I can assure you that by the time you're done reading those books, you'll never remain the same. You can also get it on bambooks.io. That's also a Nigerian platform where when you subscribe, you have access to all DSA's books. So this special Millionaires Mentorship Group is for those who want to become millionaires, those who want to become kingdom servants and kingdom financiers. These are people who will be able to become movers and shakers when it comes to finance. You cannot spread the gospel and you cannot be effective in society if you're not somebody who is financially free. And financial freedom is something God has called us to, and you need to learn the laws, and you will do it. You can do it through this platform. Just write to mentorship@godembassy.org and you'll be welcomed into the program. You'll be given instructions. Please follow each and every one of those instructions to the latter, and you will be happy that you did. Now, if you want to find out who you are, there's also a mentorship training for you. If you want to find out who you are while you're alive, there's a mentorship training that has been tailor-made for every single person who has that confusion, who has that question, and who is hungry to find out why they were created and why they were put in this world. Please write to the same address, mentorship@godembassy.com, and you'll be taught how to find your calling.org. Mentorship@godembassy.org. You'll be taught how to find your calling. So those of you who want to listen to teachings on tithes, offerings, on giving, on the abuse in the church, you can go to DSA's YouTube channel and you'll be able to see the playlist that has to do with tithes and offerings. And I can assure you that when you go through that, your life would never remain the same. All the questions you have, they've been answered. DSA is very, very detailed in his approach to teaching certain topics. And by the time you start, whatever questions you have will be answered as you go on up until the very end. And at the end, you will not only be liberated, you'll be full of love and passion to give. It's not going to stop you from giving. It's going to provoke you to give even more than you have in the past. But there will be a renewed intention. There will be a new foundation. There will be a new understanding that will prompt you to be a bigger and a better giver than you've ever been before. And you'll be a lot more prosperous as well, because whatever is done out of knowledge and understanding always bears a lot more fruits than what's done through fear and through, ignorance. So thank you very much for joining us today. Don't forget to get these books. Don't forget to make use of all of these things that have been made available to you online, because they would help transform your life and make you into the person God wants you to be, so that you can make a difference in your world. So we're going to be here again next week, Saturday. Please join us and we'll have another interesting episode for you. And I'm sure that you'll be blessed as well. Thank you very much and have a blessed week ahead.